Hello and welcome to this, our sixth episode of Discussions with Core. My name is Eamon McGann and I'm the Client Solutions Director at Core. And this episode we're going to focus in on women in tech. And to discuss this, I'm delighted to be joined by Kat Greening, our Microsoft Solutions Specialist at Core, Amanda Farrell, our Managed Service Director at Core, and Steph Jacobs, a Technology Specialist from Microsoft, specialising in security and compliance. Today's episode, I'm particularly keen to hear from everybody on their journey in the IT sector, what inspires them, and what they think can be done to help move the needle. Organizations, it's very obvious that we need diverse organizations, that they make better decisions, but yet most companies still are very much male dominated and run by men. If I can ask you guys to introduce yourselves, I'm keen to hear a little bit about your current role, what motivates you, what was the driving force behind you kind of getting into an IT career? And a little bit, and it's a selfish question, is, for your own experiences of being involved in STEM, so science and maths and so on, what was your school experience like? I'll start with you, Kat, on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. So I'm a Microsoft Solutions Specialist at Core. And I've been at Core for about 4 years, and this is actually my first job in technology. So 4 years ago, I kind of fell into it a little bit, joining Core and joining IT. So it was quite new, but I joined as a customer success manager. So my role was to help our customers with their adoption, their usage of the tools that we're selling them, to make sure that they're getting value. I've always had customer facing roles in the past, so this kind of worked quite nicely for me. But really, when I was kind of doing that role, the aspects that really drove me were the more technical business, or the technical business side. In that sense, what I mean is getting more into the technology and how that can actually help support the customers that we were speaking to, rather than just kind of showing them some numbers and giving little bits of advice. I just wanted to do a bit more, and so luckily my role has kind of expanded into more of a solution specialist, which is great, which is what I love, really. So that's kind of where I started. So I've always had, when I joined Core, having that more interest in the technology side, but it was a bit of a different story growing up in school. I actually went to school in Scotland. I don't know if you could tell from the accent, but I am Scottish, and because it was in the early 2000s when I was in school, it was still a little bit old fashioned. So we as women, or as girls, we'd study home economics, so that was cooking and sewing, and we would never go into the engineering class, and we'd never be encouraged to do that. The closest I got to doing something that's a little bit more IT was actually administration. But the things that we got taught were how to be a receptionist, so how to type on the keyboard and how to make a reception more comfortable for people coming to visit. So it was that kind of aspects that we kind of looked at in school. I didn't find that I really had the opportunity or was really encouraged to go into something that's maybe a little bit more masculine, I guess, if you call it that. So.
Okay, thank you. Amanda, same question to you.
Okay. Well, I'm considerably older than Kat, so it was obviously even more old-fashioned when I was at school. So I didn't start out in any kind of tech background at all. I did Spanish single honours at Southampton University, which ironically is known for its engineering faculties, and the male to female ratio there was 6-1 when I was at university, men to women. After I left university, I had a brief foray in 2001 into a dot-com, 6 weeks, just as the boom was turning to bust. And after that, I was headhunted to a tech startup company, which was providing MPLS networks and voice over IP. Voice over IP at that stage, 2001, being extremely cutting edge. We were one of the first in the UK to be building a VoIP platform. And I was looking after the customer base, but interfacing with the engineers constantly, attending lots of meetings with obviously mainly men, and it just really grasped me how interesting it was and how varied the day was. And so I've stayed in tech since then, primarily customer services, managed services, and always really in this kind of Cisco, MPLS and VoIP background, until in May, just only a few weeks ago I joined Core, and now I'm embarking on a new adventure with Microsoft products and services.
But it stands out from what you're saying. It's the variety of the role, the interest is kind of what kept you interested in over the years. So it's that dynamic nature of an IT role.
Absolutely, yes.
Cool, thanks Amanda. Steph, same question to you, and I believe from what I've heard, there's potentially a role change as well coming at Microsoft, so I'd be interested to hear a little bit about that if you think that's relevant.
Yes, of course. I'm happy to answer that question. So for the past 3+ years, so nearly 3.5 years, I've been working for Microsoft as a originally technical solution professional, and then later on a technical specialist. Very much like Amanda, my background isn't technical. I grew up in Germany. That's where the accent comes from. I'm sure you might have picked up on it already, but I do consider myself to be honorary British. You know, I've been living here for 21 years and 7 months, not that I'm counting. As Eamon said, it's time for me to also then move on to perhaps bigger things, not necessarily better. I've just been recently offered a position within Microsoft to lead the Microsoft Technology Center in the Silicon Valley from a modern workplace point of view as a technical architect. So that's going to be my next step, pandemic permitting, and of course personal security permitting as well, with infections and stuff still being rife at this point in time. But I digress. My background is not technical, so I actually had math at school just like everyone else. I wasn't particularly good at it. I wasn't bad at it either, so kudos to me. But when I grew up, I always wanted to be a teacher. So when my grandmother and my aunties asked little Steph, what do you want to be when you grew up? Steph would always say, oh, I want to be a teacher. So totally non-technical. As I then finished my final exams in school, I thought, well, maybe I want to work in HR. So I took a course in industrial management with a focus on personnel development and accounting, totally non-technical. And that's what I got my degree in. And then finally, when my apprenticeship and my studies came to an end, the company I was working for at that time, another very large technology organization, they said, well, sadly, we don't really have any open positions in HR, but we could either put you into the role of a data entry clerk in credit and collections. Not exactly my cup of tea, or you could just take incoming calls now, a technical support hotline, and I chose the latter. And the reasoning behind that wasn't because I was super interested in technology. It was really because I knew a couple of people there. They were young. There were, people of like-minded goals, and I was looking forward to the party after work. To the beers and wine after the work day was over. That's why I joined that team, and this is where the technology bug bit me, and it bit me hard. Within weeks, I was looking after mission critical and business critical telephone lines. I was looking after PC hotline, printer hotline, incoming calls, later on first line and second line technical support, and I never really looked back. So today, all of this curiosity and the love for everything that has to do with customer service, combined with the technology and the passion for it, made me who I am today in that phenomenon of women as a woman in a predominantly male environment.
Excellent, thank you for that. I think it's interesting, the teaching aspect. It's a common thread that I've seen from different discussions. My second question, which you've kind of all touched on a little bit, and I can maybe run back to you, Kat, was around your experiences and how you got into tech sector. And I think in particular, Kat, you touched on it briefly, and I'd like to come back to you on the topic around you've all shifted roles in some shape or form, which is interesting to see kind of how that happened. But you actually, that happened whilst in core. So you went from a kind of customer services type role, which had a technical background, into a consulting solutions role. So I think there's kind of two questions in there, Kat. One, how easy was it for you to achieve that? And what was your own motivation to do that?
So luckily, Core is quite a great company. I'm not being paid for this announcement, but luckily, our kind of boss and the way that the culture in Core kind of works is it is very much, they kind of want you to be happy in the role that you're doing, because then you're going to work better and smarter and harder, which is great. So when I was doing the customer success role, I found myself going a little bit like above and beyond, in terms of, it wasn't necessary for me to really get involved in more of the technical stuff, doing the live demonstrations behind the scenes for customers and things like that. But I found myself, pushing towards doing that because I just had a keen interest in it. And the teacher element's interesting. So I did a little bit of teaching as well in my past life before Core. So I like that aspect of that consulting, that getting that information across, teaching kind of customers, I guess, look what all this stuff can do for you. I always had a kind of interest and push towards doing that. And then as that kind of role started to grow as a customer success manager, I ended up doing training sessions with customers and really kind of doing it a little bit more. And I kind of sat my boss down and said, look, I would like to do more of this stuff. This is the bit that I really like of my job. And this bit, it's all right, but I like this bit a little bit more. Is there any way I can kind of move into that kind of path? And he said, yeah, let's try it out and see how it goes. Luckily, I didn't struggle at all to move, but I know some other people have, but that for me, that wasn't the case. It was very kind of encouraging.
Thanks, Kat. And I think that paints a very positive picture about, one, your skill set and the ability to change in any role. So I think it poses a very positive message. But I think just counterbalancing that, maybe in a question to all of you, really getting to the brass tacks, do we feel that there is a diversity issue in the tech sector? And from your own personal perspective, has it affected you? Amanda, do you mind if I start with you on that one?
Yes, absolutely. There's a diversity issue, particularly at more senior levels, I think. And I think at junior levels, women are quite well represented, but usually in the kind of non-technical arenas.
Do you mind if I add a question to you on that one, Amanda? What do you think should be done to enable more women to rise through the ranks in senior roles in IT? What is practical? What can be done?
I think it's already happening, actually. I think there's a really big push in junior schools to encourage, young girls, and it's got to start really young, before these kind of gender stereotypes start being applied as to, that being technical is a boys' sphere. And I really think that that's starting to pay off. Kids as young as sort of 8 or 9 doing coding classes, they're still overrepresented with boys. But I think there is a start, and I think business and government understands that, as the tech industry expands, we can't afford to turn our backs on 50% of the educated workforce.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much. Kat, what do you think on terms of the diversity question?
If I walk into, particularly when you said, Amanda, about the more senior roles, it shocks me if I go into a customer where I'm speaking to the CTO or an IT director and it's a female. I can't remember if that's actually ever happened, but it's very, very it's not as frequent. So it's always and when I go into a room, sometimes it can be a little bit daunting. I'm a young female going into a room full of middle-aged IT men, telling them about technology and trying to say, here's something you don't know. It's quite intimidating to do, and sometimes that doesn't get received as well, and there may be, some negative things or comments, but the majority of it's not been too bad. But it definitely is a shock when you go in and there is a female who's the senior member of staff in the IT team. I see quite a lot of junior female IT staff members, so I think that's totally correct. And it's interesting you said about the young people and younger girls getting into coding. So my sister started computer science and started doing coding when she was 15, and she said she was the only girl in the class. So she was the only one, and she felt intimidated and didn't think that she should do it because she was the only girl. Am I doing the right thing? All my friends are in other classes, and so she kept at it, which is great for her. 17 now, but yeah, it was a little bit daunting. So I think starting young is really important.
Steph, the kind of same question to you around diversity in the tech sector, and kind of how's affected you, and if you do have any comments around the seniority, that would be interesting as well.
So absolutely, yes. There is definitely a diversity issue in the tech sector. I have been very, very fortunate, as in that my experience has been thoroughly, very, very positive. When I was starting out in IT, which is much longer than I care to admit on camera, as a female in a predominantly male environment, there's not just the female aspect. There's also the aspect that I speak with an accent, that I'm a foreigner, that there is perhaps a disability or other external factors that make things more difficult, and especially made me feel a lot more self-conscious when I was walking into a room with predominantly men, or just in a customer environment where there might be high stakes. And I remember clearly when I spoke to a very great former mentor of mine, a Scottish gentleman actually called Robert, and I told him that I feel I have to work 3 times as hard to have the same level of impact when in meetings or in technical workshops. And his answer was, Stephanie, those are all things that make you who you are, make you unique. Speak quieter and they will listen more intently. Speak with an accent, they will be intrigued. And once they grasp that what you're saying is actually very valuable, you have in fact won them over completely. And the word stuck with me throughout my career. And I would encourage anyone who listens to this to, think about, your own uniqueness and use that as a strength rather than as a weakness. And as a result, when I go into customer meetings, I think to myself, what is the goal of what I want to achieve in this customer meeting or in this presentation or this broadcast that I'm making? Because I do speak at industry events quite often. And it really boils down to 3 things, none of which is technical. The first one is I want to inform. I want to teach them something. The second bit is I want to entertain. I want to make them laugh at least once. I want them to leave the session with a good feeling of happiness and, remembering the feelings that they had in the room. And finally, I also want to inspire them. I want to see that glint in their eye, that they've grasped the concept that I was looking to convey, that they get excited about, going back to their office or home and trying out that piece of technology that I've just demoed or described to them. So that's really where I see we can overcome the diversity issue, whether it has to do with you being a female or whether it has to do with you being of color or with a physical disability, or whether you're wearing a turban. All of those things don't really matter. They're part of you. Use it.